All right, I'm admitting 6 people into the from the waiting room. Welcome everyone to today's session. We will be starting in a few minutes. So as you join in, if you could, in the chat, just let us know where you're joining us from. Maybe just tell us, your name and where you're joining us from. Oh, wow. I see we have a few people from Brazil.
Wow.
Welcome. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to our session today. And as we continue to celebrate Employee Learning Week here at ATD Central Florida, our session today, very fittingly, is about the future of work and, during this COVID era. It is projected that by 2025, Millennials and Gen Z will comprise more than 75% of the US workforce. However, most employers still struggle to engage and retain Millennial and Gen Z top talent. In a few minutes, Dr. Terry Horton, our speaker for today, will discuss the differences between generations, how their perspectives and preferences about work will have shifted as a result of COVID-19, and what they want as the future of work continues to unfold. So we're very happy to have Dr. Terry Horton with us today. But first, let's take care of some internal business and introduce our team. Unfortunately, I don't have the slides for that, but I am the president of the Central Florida chapter of ATD. My name is Zizo Aku, and it is a pleasure to be here today. Now, our focus will primarily be on the ATD capability, talent development capability model. We collaborate as a team to produce events for our members and also to bring them, resources that are relevant to talent development. So today's program builds upon that. It is a pleasure once again to introduce Dr. Terry Horton. Dr. Terry is a workforce futurist, an artificial intelligence business strategist, and the founder of FuturePath LLC. She is a future, and work expert and consults, speaks, coaches, and trains executives to develop agile leaders, talent, development professionals, as well as teams, so that they can adapt, compete, scale, and thrive in the future of work. She's widely recognized as a thought leader on the future of work and organizational transformation, and has provided training and keynote speeches to Fortune 100 companies, nonprofits like us, professional associations, institutions of higher learning, and government officials from various countries. Dr. Terry holds doctorate in education focused on organizational change and leadership, a Master's of Arts in Organizational Management, an MBA in Marketing, as well as micro-credentials in Artificial Intelligence, Business Strategy, and Data Analytics. Now, some of our current projects include working with a global e-commerce company to evaluate hiring algorithms to be more empathetic and reduce unconscious bias, and with a global consulting firm on engaging Millennials and Gen Z in the workplace. So without further ado, I'd like to call in Dr. Terry to go ahead and present her material for today. So Dr. Terry, you have the floor.
My pleasure. Let's get that over. All right, good morning or good afternoon. I'm in California, so good afternoon, ATD Central Florida. It's my pleasure to be with you today and to talk with you about millennials, young millennials, and also Gen Z, a generation that's not really, we're just starting to kind of peel back the layer for what Gen Z wants in the context of work. We've done a great job on the marketing side in the context of what they want as consumers, but employers really need insights into what it is that they're looking for and what will delight them in work. And there's an overlay to that as well. And the overlay is, how has that shifted or changed? Or what does that mean? What new context has what they want changed in the backdrop of COVID? So we'll explore that as well. So we're going to talk about the differences and nuances across generations, potentially defy some of your stereotypes, and hopefully leave you today with strategies and perspectives that will allow you to engage your Millennial and Gen Z workers moving forward 2020 and beyond. So let's take a look first of all. We know this or feel it, we may know it intrinsically, but not really know the numbers behind this. We currently have 5 generations working together in the workplace. Older baby boomers, younger baby boomers, Gen X like me, millennials, and Gen Z that just entered the workforce about 2 years ago. That creates an environment potentially for tension and misunderstanding without really having clear insights and having conversations about how all of these groups can work harmoniously together. What do we know to be fact? By 2025, millennials and Gen Z will dominate the workforce. They'll be about 75% of the workforce. By 2030, 80% of the workforce. So they are a compelling force. They're a compelling force in the context of how they will change organizations, in the context of how they engage with millennials, what they do across the entire employee life cycle, and ultimately around careers. So what are some of the stereotypes? Let's kind of break this down a bit. Maybe you can type some in the chat if you don't see a stereotype that resonates with you. So in this survey, which was really interesting, it broke down, it was by Harvard Business, it came through the Harvard Business Review, and it was focused on generational differences. And part of attacking the differences really lies at the foot of really breaking down stereotypes. So what was really interesting is that older and younger workers believed that the other generations thought more negatively of them than they did. There are a lot of things to consider. There were a lot of shared goals. What else can you do? Did their survey reveal? It revealed that they enjoyed sharing stories as a tactic and strategy for breaking down some of the walls. Sharing perspectives, reversing roles, really breaking down differences. One of the challenges that my work with multi-generational teams is that there's this disconnect in the context of expectations, and it's very centered on self. So often older generations will say things like, I don't know why they're working in that way. I would never allow my child or my young adult to do that, or I never had these opportunities. And conversely, younger generations, the young millennials and Gen Z, look at older workers and they remind them of their parents or their grandparents. They don't like to change. They can't be heard. So this perspectives from this survey in terms of breaking down the walls became very powerful. One of the things I'd like for you to focus on is the power of emphasizing and focusing on shared goals, and create as many opportunities as possible to bring them together. Whether it's on cross-functional teams working on special initiatives, bring them together to really lay the foundation and create some runway for conversations, or a few of the insights that came from this survey. Let's dig deeper and let's figure out who they are. So generationally, baby boomers born between 1940 and 1959, my generation, Gen X, born between 1960 and 1979, millennials. Over time, we will continue to break down the millennial generation very much so as we did with baby boomers because the cohort was so large. So we've got, at this point, older millennials and younger millennials. What does that look like? I have a little brother who's turns 40 years old this year. He is an old millennial. Younger millennials are about 27, 28, all the way up. And then Gen Z. So we break Gen Z actually down even into two cohorts. So we've got Gen Z, which the oldest Gen Zs are about 21. My niece is 20, she'll turn 21 in February, and she's been in the workplace for nearly 2 years. Now we break that down even more into this group called alphas. And I'm actually been working with a couple of global consulting firms and providing insights on what alphas want. The youngest alphas are 7 and 8 years old. And many of them are influencers and making a difference with, in the context of brands and how brands approach them, even at this young age. And they're expected to make an even more powerful impact on the workforce moving forward. What are some of the nuances or context around the generations? We'll focus on Y and Z. So in a context, they see themselves as global citizens. They've had an opportunity to enjoy some level of economic stability, and they were the beneficiaries across most of their lives of the emergence of tech and the internet. They question everything, which I think is really funny. My generation, Gen X, I remember when I was a young adult seeing a t-shirt that said, question everything. And that was really kind of a moniker for my generation, that we question everything. Well, what's really cool about millennials, they took our questioning and said, yes, why do we do things this way? And there's a solution for that. What else? Moderately narcissistic. Not all are high on the spectrum. What else? When it comes to consumption, what they buy and what they want, experiences, experiences, experiences. Less on things like my generation and younger baby boomers. Festivals, travel, they enjoy all of those sorts of things. What about Gen Z? They are really, really centered on freedom, mobility, and contemplating a variety of realities. We'll talk more about that as we go deeper into the presentation. They're highly, highly connected. They value their social networks. They're digital natives, which means that they came out of the womb bouncing onto baby Einsteins, and they can't imagine a world without the internet and computers. They are, I love the phrase McKinsey uses, communicaholic. They are really, really centered on being able to talk and to talk through problems and issues. They want a dialogue. They want us to explain things. They want us to connect the dots from them. They're very, very realistic. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. You have to think about too, when we look at both of these generations in their view and perspective pre-COVID, both grew up on a relative diet of dystopian movies, right? That's one piece of it. So it's the Hunger Games and a host of other movies like that. But what else? Young millennials and Gen Z lived through the Great Depression. They watched their parents, grandparents, favorite aunties and uncles be impacted across the, as a result of the impact of the Great Recession, not only in work, but also financially. And now they're living through the pandemic. So those two things, in addition to 9/11, they also lived through 9/11. So you take these three critical events, they've had a profound impact on their perception of the world and what it is that they want. What else about Gen Z? They're very realistic in the context of what they see. They call BS when they see BS. And they want us to talk to them really in a pure and authentic context, to help them explain what the future looks like for them, what they can really do. What's the real value, for an example, of a college degree? What is the real value or real meaning of a career anymore? They are very unique, highly, highly ethical, and they expect ethical behavior from the brands, not only that they buy from, but the brands that they work for. I was on another panel a couple weeks ago, and I've used the example that Gen Z, in my work in marketing and media, when we would take a look at millennials, we said millennials really kind of drove and reshaped, particularly post-Great Recession or during that time. They forced the issue of corporate social responsibility because of what they saw as unethical behavior of corporations. But they kind of left it there in the context of accountability based on what they buy. Gen Z will not buy from you if you, not only in the context of ethical behavior across your supply chain, but they will also unzip your organization and take a look at how you engage with workers, what you value, and your organizational culture. And they may not, alphas will do the same. And they may not even work for you or be interested in working for you, but they will not buy from you based on that. So it has increased, both generations over a very short period of time have increased the pressure on how organizations show up, how brands show up, and how organizations show up. What else? This is really interesting too when we think about it. Sometimes we can get caught up in our own experiences as, you know, baby boomers and Gen X, and really not think about the amount of pressure that these young people are under. So 87% of millennials, nearly 100% of Gen Z, these are issues that are important to them. These are pressures that weigh on their shoulders. And in some cases, they experience. So what do they want? This sustainability report was really awesome. Here's what they expect companies to address: issues around poverty and hunger, job creation, equity, health and education, LGBTQ rights, racial equity. We saw an example of that across, not only across the country, but also across the West. Gun control, particularly Gen Z, environmental preservation, and climate change. Now, let me just repeat this for a second. They expect you to address this. Harvard Business Review came out with an article about 2 months ago. Fascinating. I'm looking forward to continuing to take a look at the research as this emerges. But what the article purports is that we are seeing a shift as a result of everything that we experienced in 2020. There is now pressure mounting and growing from millennials and Gen Z to push organizations really to expand what corporate social responsibility means. And they're expanding that to justice. Think about how many issues on this slide fall under the category of justice. So they're evaluating organizations. Do I want to work here? Will I buy or continue to buy from Amazon? Will I call Amazon out when Amazon runs commercials during the pandemic, talking about how they look out for and provide PPE for their workers in warehouses, when we realize that they're only doing so as a PR effort in response to being called out for not providing that? What does the CEO of the organization say about climate change? They will listen to that. Why? Because they realize that the thoughts and values of the CEO permeate other areas of the organization. They look deeply, they call out, but more than anything else, they want organizations to provide meaning for them as they hold them accountable and look for them to drive change in these spaces. I have a question for you. Do you really understand their experience? They are fast emerging, millennials that is, as a generation that needs the most attention because they're suffering from high levels of unemployment and underemployment. Let's unpack that for a moment. So if you remember, millennials were the first generation officially identified as the generation that would not be able to live their lives at a higher level than their parents or grandparents. First time. Devastating. Shifted their entire perspective, particularly for the young millennials, on what it means to be successful. It also triggered high levels of depression and anxiety among this generation as well. They were, up until recently, the generation that suffered from the highest level of depression and anxiety. Let's talk about underemployment for a moment. Now, this may sound a bit counterintuitive because I'm a college professor as well, and I went to school forever and ever. But One of the things that I see most often that is most painful for them is the fact that in spite of doing all the things that we taught them to do and we told them to do, and institutionally we said would work for them, many of those levers for change and success have failed them. About 40% of undergraduate college students, college graduates that completed an undergraduate degree are underemployed. That means they got a job and got a degree in accounting and they're working at Starbucks. That means they got a degree in marketing and can't push through the cracks to get a job in the industry and with the company that they want in a basic marketing role. They've become more entrepreneurial. They're very digitally connected and they've leveraged a lot of that. But underneath all of this is this management and fighting of the feeling of hopelessness and that they were left behind. It leaves a lot of pressure for employers to fill that. In fact, research from last year emerged from McKinsey that indicated that particularly millennial workers are now, over the course of the last couple of years, looking to employers to fill the gaps for traditional safety nets, right? Help to pay for college, healthcare. They're looking for organizations to fill the gap since there's not been a concentrated effort or a successful effort by way of governments to do that. So they look to you for a lot. What else? What else do we know about them? Crushing student debt. Crushing. For those of you that went to school a long time ago, just to give you some context, if you have a student loan and you graduate from college, you have 6 months before you have to start paying those student loans back. Average cost, when I went to college as an undergrad in 1983 at a state university, oh my gosh, it was only $1,000 per year, $4,000, all 4 years.
That's almost impossible now.
Completely. Yeah, so you think about a typical undergrad degree, whether it's a state university or it's a private university. We're looking at anywhere from $30,000 to $80,000, $90,000 a year for an undergraduate degree. 6 months to find a job. Mediocre advising and coaching and counseling across career centers and advisement centers on universities, university campuses, and they've got to figure it out themselves. They are living at home longer. Many of you may be experiencing that. Not because they want to, because they can't leave. They can't afford it. That has a trickle-down effect. They're getting married later, having kids later, buying houses later, and experiencing and making purchases that are tied to the promise of the work that they did. So how did that shift how they think?
Dr. Terry, I noticed Alexander says not everywhere. Maybe he may have, I think he's calling from overseas. He may have a different perspective.
Share it.
No, I meant Dr. Terry said that it was $1,000 a year for undergrad, and someone else that it's for a semester now. Not really, I can say where you can get
for a semester. Yeah,
a lot more.
A lot more. Yeah, that $1,000 a year was back in 1983 when I was going to college.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a week. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I joined at 5 minutes later. I didn't introduce myself. I don't know if you were doing the introduction part.
Probably some chat afterwards, some chat after the presentation.
Okay, perfect.
All right, great. All right, so what else? When you think about all the pressures that they bear, what else? They care more about the environment, community, neighborhoods, giving back. That really kind of emerged out of the Great Recession, particularly for the older ones. Now, this is going to be interesting. We did see a shift. Now, this point about them moving to big cities, okay, that is not for the ones that are suffering from the weight of some of these things. These are highly paid millennials, typically in a couple of industries, that are able to move into an urban city full of, tech, transportation, high rises, and they're able to pay. They have jobs that enable them to pay anywhere from $3,000 to $8,000 a month. For those folks, they have good jobs, they work in diverse environments, and the experiences that they have across both work and personally, they value. We'll have to see how COVID shifts this. What we're seeing now is a shift out of big cities. Think about the exodus that's happening like here in California, from Northern California all the way to Southern California where I live, and even on the East Coast, of young and old moving out of cities and moving back to the suburbs, realizing that some of these shifts and changes that we experienced during COVID now are systemic and will not change. So instead of paying $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month for rent in the city and taking advantage of all that brings to young folks, moving out to the suburbs, getting a bigger place, realizing that the potential of the long-term working from home and exercising from home and entertaining from home and all of those sorts of things. 44% of millennials think for the most part that they experience the best in their workplace, in spite of all of the challenges that they face personally and professionally. Only 44%, still pretty decent, 44% feel like they get the experience that they want in the workplace. Now, in light of their experience, that's great, but let's flip that statistic over. In the context of statistics for other generations and older generations, this is the lowest of all of them. So we've got a massive engagement problem. And it's not about just engaging them in the context of the work that they do in the moment. They have a bigger ask. They want more. What else? A lot of people got some of the perspectives wrong about millennials. They're not all selfish. They're not all job hoppers. What do they want? They want some stability, and they want you to be fair dealing with them. Think about Gen X and think about baby boomers. The thought of transparency around pay, we were just lucky if we were able to find out what a job paid or uncover what a job paid before we even applied. We don't live in an environment, in a world like that, high level of transparency as a result of digital access. So they know what fair is and they want fair. So if you pay them fairly, treat them well, provide them opportunities for, we used to say for Gen X and baby boomers, work-life balance. Again, no. Work-life harmony and work-life and workplace happiness. They're actually pretty loyal and turn out to be good leaders. They're actually loyal. They actually want to stay. And they'll actually do good. But what happens if you don't shift your perspective of them? And you still think of them in the context of some of those stereotypes we discussed before? What if you still kind of sort of feel like they don't matter? We've got a ton of generations in the workplace, 5 of them, all of them have got their unique challenges. One isn't better than the other, and one doesn't deserve more attention than the other. Go back to that statistic for the workplace composition and what it will be in 2025 and 2030. Many of us will still be leading, many Gen X and many young baby boomers will still be leading, but they will be the workforce. They will be. Yes.
I was just going to say there are a couple of comments in the chat. I see Caitlin and Janet, posted. Caitlin says, I wonder if there is a lot of urban flight due to COVID right now from these highly paid millennials, i.e. out of New York. She's in New York. And Janet says social media has changed how people that age interact with peers and with other people.
Definitely. Let's talk about mobility and flight. So I'll use the example of here in Southern California. One of my clients received a job offer for a company. Actually, part of what this company did was in the learning and development space. It's a global brand. And the job offer was for $175,000 per year. The job was going to be located primarily in Oakland, California, gentrified, developed area. I advised the client to turn the job down. Can you imagine that? Why? What's the average rent? Just decent. Where this person, the client, wouldn't live far away from work. It would provide an opportunity for this kind of merging of work-life harmony. $8,000 a month. Yeah, I said $8,000 a month. So you subtract out practically $100,000 of that for rent. You got it? So when these same millennials and Gen Z faced with the opportunity to work remotely while working for companies in the South, in Silicon Valley, whether it's Facebook, Salesforce, Dropbox, and others, and they have the opportunity to work remotely, why on earth would they stay? They started moving out, moving deeper east, moving deeper inland, some moving out of state. Now, there is some discussion, and time will tell on this. I think there'll be a lot of litigation around this, that if you remember, Facebook was one of the first companies to say, hey, wait a minute. The only reason we pay you, $250,000, $70,000 a year is because of the cost of living here in Silicon Valley. So, well, we're making this shift to remote work. If you move to North Dakota, we may just reconsider your compensation. More to come on that. Watch that space. But it is the ability to have a quality of life, a better quality of life, that is driving the mobility out of metropolitan areas, particularly for folks who are skilled enough and do the type of work that enables them or will enable them to work remotely. That help? Good. All right. Millennials and Gen Z are better educated than any generation. Now, what's really funny about this, the millennials are really kind of pushing, the Gen Z. The Gen Zs are saying, hey, we want some attention, all the way back to the, 2008. Pew started, researching and evaluating you all. It's our time. We want a deeper dive into who we are. Guess what? So it used to be that millennials were the most educated generation. Hands down, it's going to be Gen Z. Far more educated than any other generations. But imagine the head trip of being far the most educated cohorts, and you still can't find a job. I even hear this. I teach in an international education program for one of the universities here. And I even hear that from my international students, struggling to move into the workplace, the job they choose, at a pay they deserve.
Caitlin has another comment. She says, I've also read that Facebook was criticized for giving parents with families more time off during COVID than childless workers. And she wonders if Gen Z brought this up.
Now that's interesting. I didn't see that, but I would say that probably let's just kind of back that up and look at that. That's a very interesting point. So that goes to the heart of one issue that they are very passionate about, and it starts with an E, equity. So sometimes we think about equity in a very simplistic way. We think about equity around race, around, and around gender. They look at equity differently. So the view of that would be, why should I be punished by not being able to take advantage of the same benefits? I have similar needs based on how I've structured my life. Why would I not be entitled to that same ability to create more harmony in my life? Yeah. That could be completely from Gen Z, but let's pull back another statistic. Going all the way back to my generation, Gen X, we saw lower rates of marriage across the United States. Fewer and fewer people getting married. We have more single folks. What do we have? I'm single. I don't have any kids. I'm the best auntie and godmother on the planet, but I don't have any kids. There are approximately, this statistic was, I remember reading this about 3 years ago, there are about 40, 50 million of me, Gen X. And we just talked about the fact that millennials have delayed marriage, having kids, and all of that, primarily from economic reasons. So it didn't necessarily have to come from Gen Z. It could have been powered by and fueled by, because they have a high level of influence on generations, above them. But yeah, that boils down to them, to an issue of equity. Good question. All right. Now this is really interesting too. So when we talk about Gen Z and really kind of doing some differentiation between them, move this out of the way. The key point for them is they don't want to be defined in one way. It took me a while to understand that. So this semester I'm teaching, oh God, I've probably got a little more than 400 students total across all of my classes. I've been teaching for 10 years, primarily millennials, and then as of late, Gen Z. So not defining themselves by one stereotype, took me a while to unpack that. What else? They want to experiment with different ways of being themselves. And they know that their identities are fluid. So if I go to school to be an accountant, to get a degree in accounting, don't define me as an accountant the rest of my life, because here are some of the other things that I'm very interested in. Don't define me as a marketer. I'm a creative. And the work that I do is not just in the context of traditional marketing. I have a clothing line. I have an e-commerce company. All of that. I'll share a story with you. I got my first tattoo at 50. Oddly enough, maybe it was a mid-year crisis. My tattoo artist was one of the most fascinating young men to me ever. He grew up in extreme poverty in the South in the United States. Dealt with a lot of issues and didn't graduate from high school. He got a GED, but he's an incredible artist. So our journey together, because this tattoo took a long time to do, our journey together, I started digging in and talking to him about, like, so what do you want to do next? You're like such an amazing tattoo artist. Have you ever thought about, what do you do? What other things do you want to do as a creative? You're a creative, not just a tattoo artist, right? And so over time we talked, and I told him, I could really see you like being just a designer and taking some of the work that you do, that you put on bodies, and transforming that into working with specific communities of interest for him, surfers, skateboarders, right? And taking that art and creating a niche for yourself and custom designing those. And I'm writing a book. I just asked him a couple months ago if he designed if he would design the cover for my book. And so I use that example to say, just as I talked to him about stretching, right? So when we talk about being, and he's a Gen Z, he's a young baby boom, a young millennial. When we talk about stretching and not being identified in one way, he's actually brilliant. He defies stereotypes, right? His tattoo, his salon is in Dana Point, which is a high-income, high-profile city in Orange County. He defied all the stereotypes, and he's not just a tattoo artist. He's also a pretty good musician. He's also a photographer. Does that make sense? They want to be able to live through, manage all of those at one time, and be able to switch and live through other iterations of that. So what does that mean in the context? Think about our own strategies, like organizational strategies around career development, right? Around learning and development. That even takes a whole new shift, right? So we'll talk about this a little bit later too. Don't just train me for this job that I'm doing that I got just because I'm just right out of college. You have vision for the organization. Show me that you have vision and you believe in us. Train me for some of the things that I'll need later, not just with you, but I'll need later across the iteration of my professional life. Let's unpack this. Now, This is from McKinsey as well. The search for truth. The search for truth. So think about my generation, Gen X. They would say, you know, we're constantly questioning authority. We always want to know why, right? So then we have millennials that came through and they're like, why? Like, seriously, like, why do we pay so much for cabs? Like, seriously, like the only place we can stay is that in a hotel if we drive, right? And so they had the technology and they had a lot of other digital infrastructure in place to be able to take our questions, the questions of Gen X, and really kind of operationalize those thoughts into solutions. Now, Gen Z, they will take a look at a model, that example I used, why do we have to pay to stay in a hotel? You know, ergo, you know, here's Airbnb. Well, Gen Z wants to know the truth about Airbnb. They want Airbnb to be transparent. They want them to be realistic. Does that make sense? Let's take a look at this deeper. So, undefined, don't define me in one way. I'm more than a tattoo artist. I'm more than an accountant. I'm more than a young Black woman trying to get an education. I'm broader than that. They are extremely inclusive. Why do you think, here, see some content in the comments in the chat. Why do you think they're so inclusive? Think about how they grew up, particularly those that are middle class. For the most part, they grew up in very diverse communities. They played soccer, met up at the park. As they got older, went to Starbucks. Everywhere they went, for the most part, they saw diversity. They were looking.
I see one comment. Rosa says, definitely a result of their environment and experiences.
Definitely, definitely. They live very, very pragmatically. They want, they are not risk averse and they're not controversy averse, but they don't want to have confrontations. Now that might be hard to believe as we, you know, peel back and even in the future take a look back on history and take a look at, if we just isolate this to the social justice movement, we saw a lot of young people, they looked very angry, right? And there were young people across every stripe, from social class, race, gender, everything, right? One thing about them is they will come together and cross all of those boundaries when it comes down to something that they believe in. What's at the top of the list? Equity. What else? Issues around climate. Issues around gun control. Why did gun control come to the forefront? If you think about us younger, if you're a baby boomer or a Gen X, the most we had to prep for in school was a fire drill or an earthquake. Wrap your head around drills for an active shooter. When we think about the things that are true to them, when we pull them back like this, it's not to do so to have pity. It is for a deeper understanding of the full potential that they hold. If we look at them, employers look at them and look at their Gen Z and millennial workers in that way, think about how much creativity and innovation and change can result from that.
We have another comment from Caitlin. It says the active shooter drills were not something I experienced as a millennial. It makes her sad for younger generations, right?
Yes. So think about shows like Euphoria. I just started, my students talk about that. So I said, okay, I got to start watching that. Even if it's a little depressing, I need to watch it because it's going to provide some insights for me for some of their experiences. So go back to what I said.
My bad. She's correcting me. I think it's, she said Zanel. I can't say that word. She was referring to Zanel, I think Gen Z.
Zendaya?
Zennial.
Oh, Zennials. Yeah. Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, no, yeah, the Zennials, the Gen Z, definitely. The Alphas are experiencing that too. Not so much now because most of them are at school because of the pandemic. Think about, let's pull this back. Gen Zers leave differences aside to mobilize around causes they believe in. All right, so we already have a baseline for that. We've got the social justice movement that we experienced this year, right? Where we saw kids of all stripes, all backgrounds, political affiliations, gender, all of those things come together, right? What does that look like in your workplace?
Todd has an interesting comment. He says, my experience with Gen Z is a combination of I don't know what I want because there's so much I want, can do, and not planning ahead. Gen Y has not been much better. I get and understand what is being said, but I'm not personally seeing these aspects in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. So that's a great comment. And that goes back to my point of them looking to employers to fill gaps for traditional safety nets. What are some of the traditional safety nets? Go all the way back to high school. Most high schools in this country have eliminated. There are some school districts in California where due to budget cuts, the entire group of counselors were eliminated because they couldn't afford them. So go back to the safety net. Go back to when I was in high school. We had guidance counselors. We had counselors talking to us about going to school, what kind of careers to start, all of that, right? Marginalize and minimize. And on top of that, the model is outdated. To be a counselor at school, right? That model hails from generations before, where their job was to help students adjust from family life to school life. So the majority of them have degrees in psychology, and they're counseling them and guiding them about work and school. And there's many of them are disconnected from that space. Fast forward to college. Most career centers are underfunded, and much of what career centers teach anymore are basic resume development and cover letter development and a few interviewing skills. The majority of faculty is disconnected from the private sector and teach more theory than practice. So of course they're confused. The safety nets are broken. So they're going to continue to do the same things that we told them for the most part for a little while longer, that tell them, follow this trail, this leads to success, but they didn't get it anywhere else. So they land in the workplace and they want you to help them with that. They want career development. They want mentoring. They want coaching. They want you to help them ideate. They'll give you all they've got, but they don't have the same safety nets in place that we did.
A few more comments. Rosa says coaching is a huge benefit to offer millennials and Gen Z in the workplace. Tracy says, so they're looking for companies to fill that void that the schools and in some cases parents no longer provided, right? That's a question.
Absolutely.
And she says, interesting, could explain why mentoring and leadership problems are growing so much right now. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Good. All right. We talked about the stress level. Gen Z now highest average stress level of any demographic. Stress, anxiety. Bring COVID in for a second. Think about how social isolation, regardless of your where you land on this politically or from an ideology standpoint, let's just take a look at the impact of it. I see it in the eyes of my students on a Zoom screen every week. Disconnected from campus, unable to see their friends. Sometimes the workplace or even college campus provides the outing and connection for them that helps keep them whole in the context of being what that means for them. All of that's gone. They're working from home, going to school from home, amped up. The research it'll be probably another 5, maybe towards the end of this decade, when we really see the true impact that COVID had across all of our lives, across work and even in the mental health space. So we've talked a lot about who they are. Let's start talking about what they want. All right, so they want a humanized workplace. I'll give you all a tip. I just completed it's a certificate of sorts, but you become a certified professional. This was really cool. I don't know how long they'll offer it. I came across it about a month ago. And so WorkHuman is a platform that organizations use, particularly HR, to manage content, blah, blah, blah. But they just created a certified WorkHuman professional certification. It'll take you about 4 hours to go through it. It identifies, some key areas in the context of what it means to humanize the workplace. And that's really at the center of the work that I do and my passion around the future of work and all of that sort of stuff. How do we take a look at the unfolding of the future of work, the infusion of artificial intelligence platforms in the workplace? How do we optimize those for value, but at the same time humanize it? So it's around things like pay, safety, engagement, meaningful work, and I bring up that H word again, happiness. Ugh, right? We shudder to think, baby boomers and Gen Z, we're not responsible for your happiness in the workplace. Yeah, we are. Guess why? Because we need to be able to attract and retain and engage the top talent. So they want meaningful work. Even if they're working in the mailroom, make it meaningful for them. They want to know that they're making a difference, period. They do. They want a sense of purpose. Why am I here? I'm here because I stand behind what this company stands for, their values, all of that, the difference that they make in the world. Mentoring, we already talked about that. If you do not have a formalized mentoring program in your organization, get one. Break it into chunks. Maybe you have one chunk that's just centered around mentoring, career mentoring specifically. Perhaps the other is around longer term mentoring. Get some sponsorship in there as well. They want control over their future. So when you stick them in one job and you tell them this is what you do and this is all you need to learn about, you really don't need to learn about anything else other than how to master your role. And the only training I'm going to give you is the mandatory training throughout the year that helps you do your job faster, better, keeps us out of legal trouble, and keeps us in a workplace that's free of hostility and sexual harassment. That's not giving them control over their future. That's not giving them control over their future. They want professional development. They don't want your stale leadership development courses. They don't want your stale negotiation classes. They don't want you just pushing them and saying, hey, we've partnered with LinkedIn Learning, go take stuff. They need direction. They need to know why they need to take it. They need to be able to connect the dots. They need you to guide them and tell them, look, the fastest growing type of job, right, is hybrid jobs that don't require one fundamental skill set. So here are some of the courses that you should take. Here's some of the development that you should take. What's next? They want to live their full potential. And yes, I will say again, the burden is falling on the employer to help them do this. A lot of them don't have access to mental health support. Some of them will work for your organizations and just simply can't afford it. They want you to help them where you can. How can I experience my full potential? If I'm a customer service person on the phone and I'm answering phones and I have an AI system that gives me prompts and helps me understand how to better engage with customers that call in for problems to be resolved, I want to feel good about that. I want to know that my strength is making people smile at the end of the day and solving their problems. That makes me happy. So while you're looking at the dashboard leader, you're telling me how my ranking in terms of engagement and impact is down 5% from last week. Think about that. Career planning, not just with you, period. Who does that? What capabilities do you have for that? We talk about career planning, there's a movement, and I'm watching this and I really dig it, and it's called outskilling. So some companies, I think AT&T is doing this, is one of the companies that's doing this. So outskilling is, look, in this example, we all took a major hit during 2020. And so the environment that we're in, we realize that we'll have to, cut expenses that align our operational, efficiency with, our revenue realities. Dress it up a bit. But we do know by third quarter, before the end of third quarter 2021 for the 2020 fiscal year, that we're going to outsource 2 departments. We're going to outsource one to a vendor, and the other we're going to completely transform by way of AI and automation. And let's say you realize that in September. Outskilling means you start preparing and providing training for those workers who you know will be displaced to help them have a softer landing on the other side. That approach becomes an adjunct, if you will, to outplacement programs. Does that make sense? I think there's a question in the chat. Okay, all right. We'll talk about data a little bit more on the other side. They want you to use, I know you're collecting data, all types of data around performance, and also a lot that falls into categories of biometric and psychometric data, and they want you to use it for good. They want flexible work schedules. There are still a lot that most Gen Z want to go back to work, and they don't want to work remotely, but you have some that do. More importantly, flexibility around work schedules. They want to see not just the D, they want the I, E, and the B. So Gen X, my generation, baby boomers laid the foundation for conversations around diversity in the workplace. So Gen Z was fighting for just give us the D, just let us in, let us show you what we can do, right? It was millennials that started talking about the whole issue of inclusion and bringing that and elevating and amplifying that conversation. Don't just hire me. Show me that I'm included. If you include me, that gives me an opportunity to continue to grow and advance, and I don't feel like you just checked the box. Here comes Gen Z. Yeah, great. Yeah, you met your diversity metrics. You've got some ERGs for inclusion that really aren't really good signs of inclusion. Yeah, I see that more diverse and underrepresented groups are participating in other areas of the organization. Yeah, but there's still a lot of equity, and you still have a lot of work to do on the I. So until you fix that, I feel like I don't belong. And if I feel like I don't belong, I'm not engaged. And if I'm not engaged and I'm your top talent, I don't stay. Huge push for health and well-being. That's going to continue to amplify, particularly as we come out on the other side of COVID. Think about this slide for some of the best and most attractive companies for Gen Z. Don't necessarily look at the company, look at why it's attractive. Tech, they're able to work with a lot of other really smart workers. Good benefit, research, friendly resources, benefits, guidance and support, trust, transparency, career growth opportunities. The work environment is great. It's an innovative environment that makes them thrive. Flexibility, work-life balance or harmony, and good benefits and amenities. We're learning that Gen Zs, which it shouldn't be all that fascinating because we think about the Great Recession, where we first in the US, for the first time, the whole concept of multi-generational families started to normalize because of families having to move together because of economic pressures. You had grandparents moving in with their 50-year-old kids. They weren't ready to retire yet. You had the other happening on the reverse. And so, I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, multi-generational households and the importance of that. So the Great Recession really kind of pushed them towards seeing why they needed to have a higher level of work-life balance and what that meant in the context of those experiences. So the Great Recession, we now see economic devastation across certain parts of this country and impacting a lot of folks. What do we know? 40 million jobs lost, nearly 40 to 50% of those will not return. Benefits, benefits, benefits. That's where I was going with it. Gen Z, because of those experiences, have some of the same conservative perspectives around money and stability as their young baby boomer and Gen X parents, grandparents had, because they were living in multi-generational households and they influenced them. We had a breakout, but I'll encourage you to think about this on your own. Maybe you just kind of screenshot the slide. Think about what this means to you in your workplace. What are you doing around meaningful work, providing them with a sense of purpose?
A lot of people had asked if you would be gracious enough to share your slides so we can.
Of course, I usually send a modified version of it, definitely. As we kind of get through the last parts with our time, let me move this out of the way. Here we go. All right, what do they want? What else do they want from work? This is something you're going to have to reckon with. Gen Z, as markets recover out of COVID, they fully expect you to allow them to have a full-time job and a couple of other side hustles. What does that mean? The whole notion of employer contracts needs to evolve. I remember back in the 90s and early aughts of those employer contracts getting tighter and tighter and tighter. I had one employee, I remember when I was working in the media industry, and I had an employee who had a side job selling Mary Kay, literally. And the contract was that you could not work for anyone who, of course, any competitors, but anyone who was a client. Well, this was in television. Who wasn't advertising on TV? So that meant you couldn't even have a side job working at Domino's Pizza. Those days are over because of the response because of how we've had to respond to the economy and the growth in gig work and their propensity not to trust one employer. The issue of trust is huge with them. Huge with them. So how can they trust you? I told you they don't want to be defined in one way. How can they trust you if you try to box them in and hold them in through in the context of the work that they do? Because of all of the things that they've experienced, millennials being the first generation not to be able to live the same quality of life as their parents, and Gen Z starting to feel that as well, they're rethinking what it means to be successful. Many of them are becoming far less materialistic and focused on impact and experiences. How do you meet that? We know that COVID accelerated the unfolding of the future of work by 5 to 7 years. That is not even debated. And so most organizations are going through, they should be coming out of this now, and that's like the post-COVID shock. McKinsey refers to this as the great unfreezing. So what's the gain from this? The takeaway from this is most organizations were more agile, more resilient, and were more capable and able to cope than they realized they were. So the goal is to not lose that momentum. It's not about going back, it's about moving forward. On some of my early calls with clients about the impact of COVID, way back, going back to April, I started pulling research from the largest management consulting firms. I thought it was fascinating that they all had the same perspective. Accenture, reopen and reinvent. Deloitte, respond to the pandemic, recover, and then figure out how to thrive. Kantar, reframe, reskill, reset, move forward. McKinsey, resolve, be resilient, and return. That's where we need to go. And as you craft those strategies, particularly through the lens of learning and development, do that in the context of what we've learned about COVID and what I've shared with you about millennials and Gen Z. This is a slide that talks about the experience that many of you have had as we move through. So my argument is to keep them in mind. Most organizations went through an incredibly rapid, compressed planning period for third and fourth quarter. Once we kind of got a little bit of an understanding about like what the impact would be to from COVID and how we would maintain operational continuity, it then began, most organizations began the process of planning for those other R's that I showed you on the screen. As you move through this process in haste and continue it in Q1, don't forget about what they need. As you think about operational efficiency, as you think about investments in AI, think about their expectations around data. As you think about reducing expenses across a variety of areas, think about what that means in the context of reducing it around coaching or development or career planning. When you think about your long-term people strategies, how are you customizing those strategies across generations? Particularly knowing that they will be 75% of the workforce by 2025. Digital transformation has accelerated and will continue to accelerate. And so you need to know what they think about that as we implement more and more AI across organizations. Here's what they expect. They expect ethical and responsible policies and practices. They want you to be transparent. They want you to guard their privacy, and they don't want to feel like they're living in a corporate punitive surveillance state. So be open, transparent. They demand it. They want control over their data. They want to have the option when appropriate to be able to opt out. They want to know if you're utilizing productivity platforms infused with AI that use facial recognition, psychometric and facial analysis, psychometric analysis. It's taking tens of thousands of pictures of their face per day, looking for any opportunity to inch out just another minute or two of productivity. They don't want to see that data show up somewhere else. If you're going to coach them about their performance or their productivity, great. But what else? There's a lot of data exhaust that comes from that. A lot of data exhaust that falls into the within the boundaries or around the edges of HIPAA. They don't want you merging personal information you collect. Those productivity apps can take a look at how responsive I am, how many times I blink, how long it takes me. They can analyze cognitive abilities. What exactly will you do with that? They don't mind using that, collecting the data, as long as you're going to use it in ways that help them do their job better or experience their full potential. They want it to improve their performance, make their work more interesting, or create new career trajectories for them. So, oh, I'm sorry about that. This screen moved. This is interesting. While many workers who are looking to make a career transition need to reskill, less than half of Americans say that they have access to the training they want. Less than half. Think about the great upskill that's going to have to take place. We've got 40 million folks potentially out of work. That will probably grow as companies look to round out fiscal year 2020 and more AI is implemented. Where do they go for training? If you're in HR and you find yourself displaced and you only worked for smaller companies that use grassroots systems, where on earth do you get experience using Workday? If I need to have experience with data analytics and I'm barely understanding what that is in the context of my role, where do I go? Where do I start? So here's where L&D comes together. Here again, where we're talking about organizations filling the gaps of safety nets. Reskilling and reskilling appropriately should be at the top of your list, Training and development and reskilling and outskilling efforts can actually add competitive advantage to the employer brand and the ability to recruit and attract and recruit top talent, because there's scarcity around learning the combination of skills and learning and getting experience to the systems that will be used. So help them develop the skills that they're going to need for today and tomorrow. What do they need? Absolutely, digital skills, AI fluency. I encourage everybody, I scream at the top of my lungs, any of you, and I have your workers do this, create a training around it. Call me to do a training for you in this space. Everyone needs to have a basic understanding of how artificial intelligence is used in the workplace. Why? Because even the customer service rep answering the phone has to understand how the algorithm works, to understand the type of data that's collected to help he or she do her job better. And also to understand how he or she is being evaluated by that algorithmic supervisor in the context of performance. They also need to understand so they can help solve problems. They need digital fluency, and everyone needs to take a course in data science or a set of courses. You don't have to get a degree in data science. You don't have to, I'm not trying to convince you to be a data science, but as a learning and development professional, and as L&D becomes more automated and energized by AI systems and personalized, if you don't understand the basics of AI, and how it's used in that space, how do you even question the vendor that you're proposing to work with? How do you identify flaws? How do you identify ways in which the algorithm should be tweaked? How do you know what questions to ask when the vendor comes in and says that they have they use a proprietary algorithm and match it to your best performers? If you don't understand any of that, how do you even ask questions about mitigating bias? How do you ask questions about the true ability to drive outcomes if you don't fundamentally understand how they work? Help them develop hybrid skills. The person that works, the HR generalist, needs just as many marketing skills as needs marketing skills. They need skills in finance. Everyone needs skills in emotional intelligence. You should all consider providing emotional intelligence assessments and coaching for your work, particularly for your leaders, and embed that into your training. Why? 2-3 particular areas in emotional intelligence. Resilience, the amount of change that we are going to experience over the course of the next 2 to 3 years as organizations evolve and transition is going to require a level of resilience that most people don't have and have not honed. It's
Dr. Terry,
also,
just real quick, a few people said they had to jump off, so we want to be respectful for those people. If you need to jump off, you can. We will have this recording. It's going to be recorded, and we will send out the video. So I just wanted to chime in. But yeah, Dr. Terry, please feel free to go ahead.
Yes, this is our last slide. I didn't anticipate our Q&A in between, so that kind of drove us over the time. No worries. All right, so emotional intelligence in the context of resilience, not just for leaders, but also in flexibility and adaptability and the ability to inspire and to get the most out of workers in the context of emotional intelligence for leaders. You're going to also, my recommendation is to provide resilience training all the way down the line for your folks. In a way, without, if I can loosely use this, all of your workers have been through a war zone this year, and some of their experiences are more dire than others. So how do you support them in well-being and resilience? And then think about how you're delivering training anymore. So we've had, a lot of experience with remote learning. Everybody is burnt out on Zoom, literally, right? So Zoom was kind of cool initially when it started. There were a lot of folks who hadn't used Zoom before. So now it's just another full screen. So think about delivering content using virtual reality and more immersive experiences. Think of partnering with event companies that utilize a variety of ways to create a more compelling learning environment. A year of Zooming, people are zoomed out. So think about expanding the way that you deliver so that your training can have more impact. And definitely start thinking about partnerships for boot camps, certifications, and micro-credentials. The micro-credentials they are the skill gap fillers of the future. They've been emerging more and more. I teach at Cornell University. I teach in their diversity and inclusion certificate program and a couple of others. Can't even tell you how many people have come to those programs. They're not getting degrees. They're getting degrees, and I'm not plugging them, but it's an example of a micro-credential. The micro-credential that I got from MIT in AI business strategy was fantastic, laid the foundation for me to fill the gaps moving forward 2 years ago, if not 2.5 years ago, as it relates to AI fluency. If you're interested, you can take courses on Coursera. There's one taught by Dr. Andrew Ng. It's called AI for Everyone, totally free. Coursera offers a data science course that's sponsored through IBM for business professionals. I think it might be like $150 to take it or something like that. I give you like 3 months to take it, and I think you pay a monthly rate of like $59, something like that. Microsoft also has Microsoft AI Business School, totally free, all video based, broken down across different disciplines. Might take you a day to complete it. That's a good baseline. So ultimately, at the end of the day, when we talk about the new normal, the continued unfolding of the future of work, when we talk about our COVID-altered future of work, at the end of the day, your goal as L&D leaders should be to do what I call, this is the mantra for my business, help them be resilient, relevant, bold, and thrive. That should be our goal moving forward. I'm writing a book that comes out in the spring about thriving in the unfolding of the future of work. That will really provide a roadmap for how not only leaders, but workers can move effectively through the unfolding and give them an opportunity to really kind of lay out goals around learning and development that position them to do this. So hopefully I'll circle back with you all next in the spring and share that with you. But that really is the essence of it. Hopefully you've gotten a better understanding of who they are, their experience, what they want, the dynamic role that they'll play in the future of work as it continues to unfold, and the critical role that L&D plays in that space. And I thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Terry. That was really insightful. Very, very insightful stuff.
Thank you so much.
I know we have a few people, still in the, hanging out with us. Want to open it up if there are a few questions. We can take a few questions real quick. Want to be respectful of everyone's time. Do we have any general questions? And yes, we will send out, the slides and the recording. I see a few questions. No questions in the chat.
Okay.
You can take yourself off mic if you do have a question.
I didn't have questions. I just wanted to thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Liz. All right. Well, on that note, I want to just thank you, Dr. Horton. It's been a pleasure getting to meet you and really insightful stuff. We thank you for your time today and for sharing this great information. And we look forward to seeing, the outcome of your, getting to hear about your book once it's ready, and maybe we can get to have you speak again to, our members. But thank you so much. And to, the rest of us, we have another session coming up tomorrow, our holiday mingle. So please don't forget, we'll have the facilitator showdown then and a host of other activities. So thank you everyone for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Take care.
I'm going to stay on, Caesar.
Okay, no problem. I'll stay on. I'm going to stop the recording shortly. All right.